Google's new guidelines in terms of what they're going to do in the future if there's any sort of large event. And they use this really blanket description of what this event would be, anything of social consequence, anything involving a pandemic. And so they're essentially expanding their ability to censor. Now, you could imagine where you could justify that if they weren't horribly wrong just a couple of years ago. If just a couple of years ago, if you had discussed things on your podcast that are undeniably true and now accepted as fact, you would be banned. You would be kicked off. That's a fact. We know that to be a fact. And we know that there was pressure, at least on Twitter, documented pressure by these groups that have a vested interest in pushing a very specific narrative to deny people access to the truth. And the best way to do that in their eyes was ban people, suppress information, kick people off the platform, demonetize them, so you incentivize them to self-censor. There was all these tactics being put in place. In Google, they're openly stating that they'd like to do more of this after they were horribly unsuccessful and incorrect doing this during the first pandemic.
Well, that is a perfect mirror for what's going on in the World Health Organization as well, where I don't know how much you've been following it, but there is a pandemic preparedness treaty modification and international health regulations that are hurtling towards approval in May of this year. And what they are is the exact rules that would have allowed the CDC and the WHO and all of those over in Fauci land to win during COVID if they had been in place. So it looks to me like the World Health Organization is setting us up for a rematch in which we cannot do what we succeeded in doing, which is upend their narrative and get higher quality information into discussion. And they're doing this at every level.
And how do they want to do it? What's their plan?
Well, so first of all, the plan keeps morphing. Our ability to even see it is not maintained. They keep changing its name so it's hard to search on. But the overarching picture is the World Health Organization would like the ability to declare a pandemic for any reason whatsoever, including climate change, that in the event of such a pandemic, they want the ability to mandate behavior, including lockdowns. They specifically call out the ability to mandate vaccines. They specifically call out the ability to mandate gene therapy, which is frightening. And what's more, they want the ability to censor in order to make the campaign work, in addition to being able to redistribute medications. So, for example, let's say that they decided that people like you and me were out of hand with ivermectin and they wanted to just mandate that it be sent to some far-flung corner of the globe so it would be a completely academic issue. All of these things are spelled out in detail in this document. And it is written in such a way that it's just boring.
Who's voting on this?
All of the member nations of the UN. Or of the WHO. So this is a absolutely diabolical plan that, I mean, if you sat down and you said, well, what rules would have allowed them to win during COVID rather than be embarrassed by podcasters, this is the set of rules. And it is a complete surrender of national sovereignty. Tedros, in addressing that concern, which tells us that we are beginning to make headway raising people's concern about this, what he said is it's not a compromise of sovereignty. And then his explanation for why it's not is that effectively this is going to be voted on by your elected governments. So his point is you've elected governments that should block this if it's a breach of your sovereignty, and they're not going to do it. So your sovereignty is intact, but that does mean that he's going to have the ability to declare an emergency and then implement all of these draconian measures. It's absolutely terrifying.
Have they suffered any worldwide decrease in respect, or whether or not people value their opinion, or whether or not people value their competency? Or is it am I in a bubble where I hear the World Health Organization and I go, these people are out of their fucking minds? But does the rest of the world think like that? Like, what is the general perception? What's the temperature in the world when it comes to these things?